A man changes his Wi-Fi password, and his neighbor calls 911 on him. But when the cops show up, they discover something far more unsettling. Ethan Hayes wasn't the kind of guy who enjoyed drama. He preferred a quiet life, working remotely, keeping his lawn perfectly trimmed, and avoiding small talk with his neighbors unless absolutely necessary. For years, he'd managed to stay under the radar, and that's exactly how he liked it. But one seemingly harmless decision turned his peaceful existence upside down. It all started on an ordinary Thursday afternoon in Crestwood, Missouri. Ethan had just finished a long work session and decided to take a quick break. As he scrolled through his phone, he noticed his Wi-Fi had been acting strange lately. Sluggish speeds, constant buffering, and random disconnections. At first, he blamed his internet provider, but a nagging feeling told him there was more to it. Curious, he opened his router settings and began poking around. That's when he saw it, a device connected to his network that he didn't recognize. The name wasn't a random jumble of characters, it was labeled Crestwood Score I01. Ethan froze. He lived alone. The only devices connected to his Wi-Fi were his phone, laptop, and smart TV. He never shared his password with anyone, not even his closest friends. So who was using his internet? Frustrated, Ethan decided to disconnect all unknown devices from his network and reset his password. He stepped outside to get a better signal, leaning against the side of his house as he typed in the new credentials. That's when Sarah Bennett noticed him from her living room window. She saw Ethan standing in his driveway, staring intently at his phone, his fingers tapping rapidly on the screen. To her, it looked suspicious. She had never fully trusted him. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he kept to himself. He never attended neighborhood gatherings, rarely waved hello, and seemed to avoid any kind of interaction. Now, here he was, standing outside, fiddling with his phone like he was up to no good. Her imagination ran wild. Maybe he was hacking into someone's system or planning something illegal. She didn't have proof, but her gut told her something was off. Without thinking twice, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "Hi, I need to report something suspicious. My neighbor is outside, doing something strange with his phone. I can't explain it, but it doesn't look right. Can you send someone to check it out?" The dispatcher asked a few questions, but Sarah didn't have concrete answers. She just kept insisting, "He's definitely up to something. I can feel it." Within minutes, the police were on their way. Meanwhile, Ethan had no idea that his quiet afternoon was about to spiral into a full-blown investigation. What neither of them realized, however, was that the real danger had nothing to do with Ethan at all. Ethan had just finished updating his Wi-Fi password when he heard the sirens. At first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe they were headed somewhere else. But then he saw the squad car slow down and stop right in front of his house. Two officers stepped out. The first was a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp features, Detective Marcus Reed. His partner, Officer Claire Bennett, had a more compact frame, but carried herself with an air of quiet authority. Ethan let out a slow breath. "Here we go." He stayed where he was, leaning against the side of his house as the officers approached. Reed's hand rested near his belt, not on his gun, but close enough to send a clear message. "Sir," Reed called out, his voice steady but firm, "we received a call about some suspicious activity. Mind telling us what you're doing out here?" Ethan frowned, glancing between the two officers. "Suspicious activity? I'm standing in my own driveway. I was just changing my Wi-Fi password." His tone was calm, though a hint of confusion crept in. He knew how quickly situations like this could spiral out of control. Reed exchanged a quick glance with Bennett before turning back to Ethan. "Do you live here?" Ethan almost laughed. What kind of question was that? His car was parked in the driveway, and his name was clearly displayed on the mailbox. "Yeah," he said, crossing his arms. "I've lived here for 3 years." Before Reed could respond, a voice cut through the air. "He's lying." Ethan turned, and there she was. Sarah Bennett, standing on her porch with her arms folded, watching everything like she was the self-appointed neighborhood watch. "He's always outside doing something," she said, her voice sharp and accusing. "Messing with his phone, looking around like he's watching people. And now he's been standing in the same spot for 10 minutes, just tapping away on his screen." Ethan couldn't believe it. Was she serious? I was on my router settings, he said flatly, because someone I don't know has been using my Wi-Fi. Sarah scoffed. Oh, sure. And I'm supposed to believe that? Detective Reed turned to her, his tone calm but firm. Ma'am, do you have any evidence that Mr. Hayes has done something illegal? Sarah hesitated, because of course she didn't. She just had a bad feeling. I don't know, she admitted. I just think you should check. Reed exhaled, his patience wearing thin. He turned back to Ethan. Sir, would you mind if we take a quick look at your router settings? Just to clear this up. Ethan clenched his jaw. He shouldn't have to prove anything, but he also knew how quickly situations like this could escalate. Fine, he muttered, unlocking his phone and pulling up the settings. Here, take a look. Reed leaned in, his eyes scanning the list of connected devices. And that's when his expression changed. Because there it was. Crestwood I-1. Who owns that device? Reed asked. Ethan shook his head. Not me. Officer Bennett stepped in, her eyebrows raised. So, someone's been using your Wi-Fi without permission? Ethan nodded. And I don't think they were just stealing internet. Look at the connection logs. It's been running non-stop. Someone's been watching. Reed's posture shifted. This wasn't just a petty neighbor dispute anymore. Sarah, still standing on her porch, suddenly looked uneasy. Wait, what do you mean? Watching? Ethan turned to her, his eyes cold. I mean, someone has been spying, and they might be watching all of us, but the real question is, who? Silence settled over the front yard. The weight of Ethan's words hung in the air. Sarah, who had been so sure she was in the right, suddenly looked uneasy. Spying? That wasn't what she expected to hear. Detective Reed straightened up, his tone now more serious. All right, he said, let's get inside. I want to see exactly what we're dealing with. Ethan didn't argue. He led the officers into his house, his frustration simmering just below the surface. He hadn't done anything wrong, yet here he was, being treated like a suspect in his own home. Sarah hesitated before following. She wasn't sure why, but something told her she needed to hear this. Once inside, Ethan placed his phone on the dining table and mirrored the router settings onto his laptop screen. The device list appeared. There it was again, Crestwood I-1, still connected, still active. Officer Bennett leaned in, scanning the details. Can you tell what kind of device this is? Ethan clicked around, his fingers moving quickly. I can't tell exactly, but he opened the activity logs and froze. Reed noticed the shift in his expression. What is it? Ethan's throat went dry. It's been accessing camera feeds. The room went dead quiet. Sarah blinked. I don't understand. What camera feeds? Ethan turned the laptop around. Mine, he said. My home security cameras. Someone's been logging in and watching my live feeds. Bennett's expression tightened. You're saying someone has been spying on you through your own security system? Ethan exhaled sharply. That's exactly what I'm saying. But then his stomach dropped as he scrolled further. It wasn't just his cameras. His system had flagged multiple IP addresses, some belonging to his network, but others, different homes. Oh, this is bad, Ethan murmured. Reed leaned closer. What do you mean? Ethan tapped the screen. Whoever this is, they're not just watching me, they're watching other people in the neighborhood. Sarah took a step back, shaking her head. No, that can't be right. Ethan turned to her. You sure about that? He clicked another log. A new feed opened, a dimly lit hallway appeared, then a living room, then a bedroom. Sarah gasped. Wait, that's... Ethan didn't even have to ask. He recognized it immediately. It was her house. She stumbled backward, pressing a hand to her mouth. Reed's voice was sharp. How the hell is this happening? Ethan gritted his teeth. If I had to guess, someone in the neighborhood set up a fake network, a Wi-Fi signal that looks like a normal connection. People unknowingly connect to it, and once they do, their devices get compromised. Bennett's face darkened. You mean a man-in-the-middle attack? Ethan nodded. Exactly. Sarah's voice shook. So you're saying someone's been, what? Watching me? My family? Ethan's eyes didn't leave hers. That's exactly what I'm saying. She sank into a chair, her hands trembling. Oh my God. Navarro's jaw tightened. All right, we need to figure out who's behind this. And fast. But what none of them knew was that the person responsible was a lot closer than they thought. Detective Reed wasted no time. He pulled out his radio and called in for cybercrime support. This is bigger than we thought, he muttered to Officer Bennett. If someone's running a surveillance network, they're not just invading privacy. They're committing a felony. Bennett nodded, her expression serious. And if we don't stop them now, who knows how far they've already gone. Ethan, still seated at his laptop, was already digging deeper. He wasn't a hacker, but he knew enough about network security to trace where the data was being sent. He opened the IP logs and froze. Wait, this can't be right. Reed looked up. What? Ethan turned the laptop screen so they could see. The data isn't going to some random server, it's being sent to an address right here in the neighborhood. Sarah's eyes widened. You mean someone close by is behind this? Ethan nodded. It's coming from a house just a few doors down. Reed's expression darkened. Can you pinpoint exactly which one? Ethan worked fast, cross-referencing connection timestamps with signal strength. Within minutes, he had a match. His stomach dropped. He recognized the address. Sarah did too. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That's... Ethan cut her off, voice cold. That's Ryan's house. Ryan Bennett, Sarah's own nephew. A 22-year-old college student who had moved in with her a few months ago. He was quiet, always on his computer, barely socialized. Now suddenly things were making a whole lot of sense. Sarah's face went pale. No, that doesn't make any sense. Ryan isn't... He wouldn't. Bennett stepped in. We need to talk to him. Now. Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to believe it, but deep down, something in her gut told her it was true. I'll take you to him, she murmured. Ethan stood. I'm coming too. Reed gave him a sharp look. No, you stay here. Let us handle this. Ethan clenched his jaw. He hated sitting back when he was the one who uncovered everything, but he also knew pushing back wouldn't help. Fine, he muttered, but you'd better get the truth out of him. But the truth? It was even worse than they imagined. Sarah's hands shook as she led Reed and Bennett down the street to her house. Every step felt heavier than the last. Ryan, the kid she had taken in, the one she helped through school, it couldn't be him. And yet, deep down, a voice in her head whispered, what if it is? She opened the front door, calling out, Ryan, can you come downstairs for a minute? No answer. Reed exchanged a look with Bennett before stepping inside. We're going up? Sarah didn't argue. She just wrapped her arms around herself, her breath unsteady. They climbed the stairs, reaching Ryan's bedroom door. It was shut, no sounds inside. Reed knocked hard. Ryan, this is the police, we need to talk. Still nothing. Then, the sound of movement, a chair scraping, footsteps. Bennett's hand hovered over her gun. Open the door, now. Slowly, the knob turned. The door creaked open, revealing Ryan Bennett. He looked startled, nervous, his eyes darting between Reed, Bennett, and his aunt. His hands fidgeted at his sides. What's going on? He asked, voice tight. Reed studied him. We have reason to believe you've been accessing private security cameras in the neighborhood. You want to explain that? Ryan's face barely flinched, but his fingers curled slightly, like he was gripping something invisible. What? That's crazy, he scoffed. I don't know what you're talking about. Bennett wasn't buying it. Mind if we check your laptop? His jaw tightened. You don't have a warrant. Reed stepped closer. Ryan, we can get one, but right now we're giving you a chance to tell us the truth before this gets worse. A long, tense beat. Then Ryan exhaled. Look, He ran a hand through his hair. I wasn't doing anything illegal, okay? Reed cut him off. Then why is your IP address linked to a network breach involving multiple homes? Ryan froze. Sarah's voice broke. Ryan, please tell me you're not involved in this. His eyes darted to her, and for the first time his mask cracked. I didn't mean for it to get this far, he muttered. It started as a joke. I wanted to see if I could get into someone's Wi-Fi just to mess with them. Reed's voice was sharp. So you admit you hacked into the network? Ryan hesitated. Then he nodded. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Ryan kept going, voice faster now. It was just supposed to be a prank. But then I saw the security cameras, and I got curious. Bennett's eyes narrowed. Curious or obsessed? Ryan didn't answer. Reed's patience ran out. How many people have you watched? Silence. Then, his voice dropped. I don't know. Sarah staggered back. Oh my God. Ryan looked at her and for the first time, real regret crossed his face. I swear, I wasn't hurting anyone, he said. Reed didn't let him finish. Ryan Bennett, you're under arrest for unauthorized access of a computer network and unlawful surveillance. Ryan went pale. Wait, no. Bennett was already pulling out her cuffs. Sarah turned away, covering her face as tears welled in her eyes. Ethan had been right all along. And the worst part? She had called the cops on him when the real danger had been inside her house the whole time. But this wasn't over yet. Ryan didn't resist. He stood there, wrists bound in cuffs, staring at the floor as Reed read him his rights. It was over. Sarah's breath was shaky. She couldn't even look at him. This was her nephew, the boy she had taken in, fed, supported. And he had been violating the privacy of their entire neighborhood. Reed guided Ryan toward the door, but before stepping out, he turned to Ethan, who had been watching from the sidewalk. "You were right," Reed admitted. "If you hadn't caught this, we might have never known." Ethan didn't say anything at first. He just let out a slow breath, looking between Ryan and Sarah. Then finally he spoke. "You know what's crazy?" His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. "I was out here, minding my business, changing my own Wi-Fi password, and yet somehow, I was the one who got the cops called on me." Sarah flinched. She had no defense because there was none. I was wrong," she murmured. "I made an assumption, and it was completely unfair." Ethan let that sit in the air for a moment. Then, shaking his head, he turned toward his house. "I don't need an apology," he said over his shoulder. "Just do better." And with that, he went inside. Reed and Bennett exchanged a look before leading Ryan toward the patrol car. Sarah stayed behind, standing alone in the middle of the street. The truth had been right in front of her all along, but she had been too busy looking at the wrong person. And that mistake? It would haunt her for a long, long time. Assumptions carry consequences. Rushing to conclusions driven by bias or suspicion can destroy innocent lives while the real threat remains unnoticed. Rather than judging without proof, take a moment to step back. Observe carefully. Listen attentively. The truth may not be what you anticipate. If this story gave you a new perspective, share it. You never know who might need this reminder today.